Hello, and welcome everyone to the September 23rd Administrative Committee meeting. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the August 26th Administrative Committee minutes.
They looked fine to me.
Indeed.
Yep, and me as well. So minutes are approved. Next item is the management structure reorganization with Gary Reedner presenting today.
Thank you very much. Should work. There we go. We have before you today something that we've talked about for several months, including during the budget, about looking at some different management structures. I gave you a memo that outlined the history of the management structure that we have at this time that dates back to 1977. Excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse today. But as worked with Mayor Lambert on different ways to do things, looking at transitions of departments. And yes, I've even got to look at my own career in terms of I'm not going to be here forever. So is there a management structure that should be reviewed to determine if there is a better management structure for the city? We remain a mayor council, strong mayor council form of government, as there's been some, not questions, but concerns about whether this management structure will have any effect on that. And the answer is no. The mayor remains the CEO of the city. The council remains the board of directors for the city with ultimate authority to pass ordinances, budgets, that sort of thing. The mayor is in charge of the executive functions of the city. So the restructuring as far as how the operations of the city move forward, unless it violates ordinance or statute, is the mayor's responsibility. So anyway, with that as a background, the idea here is to hopefully diffuse more of the decision-making from being a single person, the city supervisor's position, and moving it among what we're calling groups. We talked about them as being divisions earlier. So this is our city organization chart right now. And as you can see, the mayor as the CEO of the city. I've seen a lot of these where the mayor and council coexist on the same level. Most traditional org charts put it like this. So the mayor has his functions over the operation. The city council has their function over the policy, overall policy making, ordinances of the city, and the city commissions, typically because they have council liaisons, are more aligned with city council. So this is how it will remain from this level up, just as it is today. The reorganization we're talking about bifurcates some of that, or at least diffuses some of the supervisory authority and responsibility from the city supervisor to those groups I just mentioned. But just wanted to make sure that there is no denigration or reduction of authority in either the mayor or the city supervisor's position, or excuse me, mayor, city council's position, and that was not a Freudian slip. That is set by ordinance, and the only way that can change is if there is a change in our governmental structure, which this does not rise to that level.
A Reedian one.
What's that?
It was a Reedian.
Oh, there you go. So we have the current organizational structure. This is everything below mayor and city council. And as you can see, the city supervisor is in a very flat organization, so that I end up with about 16 direct reports. So that means 16 evaluations. That means that all of these positions, as well as administrative staff, report directly to the city supervisor's position, which seems a little bit inefficient as you try to have meetings, regular meetings with your staff. If those meetings take, for instance, a week every week or every 2 weeks, you are taking a whole lot of time just in meetings. We aren't a big enough organization that the city supervisor does not have projects to work on. You've seen that whether it is assisting with sanitation stuff or any of the number of different things, there is work to be done that is task work too. So trying to get all that done just creates kind of an inefficiency. And as we've discussed with different departments over the years, their biggest issue is that there isn't enough time, they don't view that there's enough time to really have that one-on-one conversation that they really need. So the idea is to take this structure and go to this structure. This is the revised structure. It's very similar to a proposal, I shouldn't say very similar, but somewhat similar to a proposal that was floated out in the late 1980s to create 3 separate divisions in the city. We prefer to call them groups now, but you have the Administration, Finance, and Public Safety Group, which is managed directly by the city supervisor's position. There is still direct supervision over these departments: police, fire, legal, and finance. And of course over the city clerk as well. And then we have different divisions for more of the diversified functions that you see. So we are calling it Deputy City Supervisor for Community Planning and Design. This is something we talked about where engineering, community development, grants will all be combined in one group. The idea is to get like functions and like duties in the same building, if you will, or under the same management. So we've talked for years about getting our city infrastructure, planning, as well as projects all on the same page. This will create a more integrated way of approaching that. We have Deputy City Supervisor for Public Works and Services. Really didn't want to have the term Public Works in that. I prefer Public Utilities. However, Public Works is sort of a term of art in municipal lingo. So in order that you can converse and speak to other folks in other cities, Public Works is typically water, sewer, streets, that sort of thing. You'll see under here there is, as I mentioned before, in the community planning and design, grants will go from administration to community planning and design, and engineering will go from the traditional public works to community planning and design. In public works and services, right now, environmental services, fleet, streets and storm, wastewater and water are already in what we used to call Deputy Director of Operations. That's Tyler Palmer's division, if you will, under Public Works. We've added sanitation to that. One of the things that we're trying to do in our model as well is to follow somewhat of our functionality that's set out by our fund budgets. So the enterprise funds make sense to have those in one division. Sanitation traditionally across the nation, if sanitation is a function of city government, commonly referred to as an all-service city, they're typically in Public Works. Public Works is one of those divisions that could become huge. Virtually everything is a public work at some level. For instance, public buildings are public works. However, traditionally in the city of Moscow, they've been managed by facilities, which is part of Parks and Recreation. So this is how Public Works and Services would be fashioned. Then you have Deputy City Supervisor, Culture, Recreation, and Employee Services. This probably is the biggest hybrid of the divisions that we have, or the groups that we have. Parks and Recreation, arts and community events are special revenue funds under the Culture and Recreation Fund. Information Systems is an internal service fund, as is Fleet over here under Public Works and Services. And Human Resources is a general fund. So looking at that, however, there's a lot of like services here. Human Resources is a resource to all city employees. Information Systems is a service that's provided to all city employees. So it was determined that those were areas we talked at one time, or at least I considered at one time, to keep Information Systems and Human Resources under Administration, Finance, and Public Safety. Again, you can start to remove silos and try to get some cross-pollination among these groups. If we went back to parsing out every different department, we just as well keep the organizational structure that we have now. So, breaking it down even further, Administration, Finance, and Public Safety Group, Looks very much like what you just saw, just got rid of all of the chains of command underneath. So again, traditionally, these departments will keep that very same line of command that they have now, or line of supervision. These departments, there will be somebody between department directors, the human resource, or excuse me, the Parks and Recreation Director and the Information Systems Director retain their titles. We are promoting a Human Resources Manager instead of a Human Resources Director, just as we changed from a Arts Director to a Arts Manager. You also see, we'll get to that in a moment, you'll also see a Community Events Manager. And the idea is to determine whether or not if a position needs to be a director, and that there's a bunch of factors that go into that. Discretion, the amount of supervision, numbers of people that are supervised. Is it a distinct operation that should be a separate department? And you get some hybrids in there. Human resources, if we had enough people in human resources, might very well be a different department rather than part of culture,
Okay.
recreation, employee services.
Don't change that, please.
Okay.
Can you, will you clarify for me, and it might be just, you haven't gone to school to read org charts in a while. Does that go down through the culture, recreation, and employee services as
No,
well?
No.
Okay,
That's just because if we get it so small, you can't read it. Yeah, we could have had all of these, but the deputy city supervisors have additional duties. They will act as,
okay.
when I'm out of town, they will be acting city supervisors, designated as acting city supervisors when I'm gone. So they have additional duties. We had determined, we call them group leaders now instead of division heads, which is in a typical system, that's what you would call them. But their responsibility for all of the operations underneath, within their group. So as we move on to the next one, Bill Belknap will be heading up the Community Planning and Design Group. And again, you see all of these combined very much alike. Planning, building code, building safety functions, engineering, manager, city engineer. This is the group where we had a Public Works Director. Public Works Director, as I mentioned in my memo, was created in the late 80s. It was a position as part, I mentioned the previous proposal to have 3 separate divisions. Public Works was the only one of those 3 that was ever put in place. So once the Public Works Director position goes away, then those duties will be split up, if you will. Some of them to the Public Works and Services Division or group, and some of them in the engineering manager group or the community planning and design group.
And I feel like you probably get to it, but then since Bill's both with the Moscow Urban Renewal, will that change?
We will continue that to see what the workload is, and then if it's determined that that's something that is best assigned to someone else, then we'll manage that when it happens. Bill's got experience there. I used to be the executive director of that group as well, the URA. So it moves on as is necessary for the function of city government. The agreement that we have with the Urban Renewal Agency is that we will provide administrative services to them. And so we will continue to do that unless the city decides it does not want to. But we want the Urban Renewal Agency to have the best leadership possible. So Bill will continue to monitor that as he goes through.
Are all 3 of these deputy city supervisors, will they all have the same title, or is it deputy city supervisor, community planning design group? Or-
I know it seems like a big title, but there's really no other way to do it.
Okay.
Otherwise, you could have division heads or whatever. Deputy seemed to be the one that was most descriptive of the job that they do. There was even some talk that we should go from being a city supervisor to a city administrator. The MPAs in our group were all about that. Pullman has gone to a city administrator. Adam Lincoln's a city administrator, not a city supervisor. At this stage in my career, I would just as soon stay city supervisor, and after I retire, then if they want to change it, the council can change it, the mayor can change it. But I'm happy with where it is now. That's probably the one thing that has my stamp on this whole thing, is I'd just like to keep the title that I am. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm just curious, are you, when you finish with that particular layout, are you going to put people's names up underneath?
Yes, we have an expanded org chart that has all of the positions that are in there. In this particular, and you'll see it throughout, but, well, let's go through and then we'll talk about some of the particular changes. Public Works and Services, Tyler Palmer, has a lot of the same duties that he has now, except that Environmental Services Group has changed. Council approved that position going from a supervisor to a manager, so Kyle Steele will be managing that. With stormwater coming on, our NPDES issues, or continuing permitting issues at the Water Reclamation and Reuse Facility. Kyle has a lot to do. He's also very involved in the water adjudication, so he's got a lot of irons in the fire at this point. But to the point that we felt that he was doing the job of a manager and not just a supervisor. So his main duty wasn't just supervision. He was also had some other skills he was bringing to the job. Street Storm Manager, that is Steve Schulte. He, of course, is our streets manager now, but he will also handle the stormwater duties when he gets there as well. There's one here that I missed, and I'm sorry about that, but sanitation manager should be in here as well. I had it on there, but when I started messing with the org chart, I was dropping stuff off. Fleet manager, Carl Riedinger. Public utility manager of water is Michael, help me out. Parker. And Evan Timar is our sewer and water reclamation reuse facility. And of course, Tim Davis is our sanitation manager. Recreation, Culture, and Employee Services, Jen Piffner will be leading up that group. As you know, she is already performing interim duties for Human Resources. We've determined that that is a big enough part of the job that we need to probably go back to a position to fill that. Again, it was determined that, at least I determined that it was not a director position at that point. A lot of the job, the duties can be handled through a manager situation. You'll see we've got 3 managers in this division. Community Events Manager, Amanda Argona, and Arts Program Manager, Megan Cherry. That position, Arts Program Manager, was the Arts Director position. Kathleen Burns previously held that. And Community Events Manager didn't exist 2 years ago. Farmers Market, which equated to community events, was in the Arts Department. That was determined when Farmers Market started getting to the point it needed more specific and more full-time attention. We also have a ton of community events, other community events that we're dealing with all the time. In fact, in community events, with some changes that have happened in the current Public Works Department, as far as street closure and that sort of thing, that's now being handled out of community events. The whole idea is to get more efficiency out of what the staff that we have. Parks and Recreation Director, that's a big job, a lot of employees. That's a position that will continue being a director. Information Systems as well. There are 4 employees in the Information Systems Department, along with the director. So. And a lot of responsibilities. But again, that is a service that is goes out to all the employees just as Human Resources does. So it seemed to align in this group very well. Yes?
When do you think you'll know about, to decide on the Human Resources when?
I would anticipate sometime during the winter after the first of the year. Jen's doing a good job going through personnel issues, getting some standard operating procedures in place, streamlining some processes, how we handle personnel action forms, for instance. There's different ways. each department does it a little different way, and then they all come into both payroll and the human resources department. It creates confusion. So we want to make sure that we're streamlined across so that everybody knows what the duties HR has and the duties payroll has. So it's taking a while to get all that in place. Kelly Jones, as you know, a year and a half ago, went from being a half-time HR assistant to being a half-time HR assistant and administrative assistant to being a full-time HR assistant with some administrative assistant duties, but not nearly as many as they had before. And as we become more digital, working with the Murray Group, who administers our health services, if you will, negotiates contracts with us from Regents, helped us set up the framework for the self-funding insurance model. There is a lot of reporting every year at open enrollment. Everybody gets a chance to change how they want their benefits to be. Do you want, if you've got, say your spouse works somewhere else and they were previously on your insurance, you have to make a choice that you don't want them on your insurance and so on and so forth. When you manage that for 160 employees and you try to do it electronically, somebody still needs to make sure that the employees are well-trained and informed how to do that. So that's just one example of how things go. One of the things that they've been involved in within the last couple of weeks has been the transition to the salary adjustments being made in the police department that are effective the first pay period in October. So those types of things come up all the time. So I think that is the end of the, yes. So let's go back here. Catherine, you had a question about when we're going to get names up here. You know the names of these folks, obviously James Fry, Brian Nickerson, Mia Bautista, and Sarah Banks. And you'll notice that the Moscow Volunteer Fire Department is a different color. That's because we don't manage the fire department. One of the things that Chief Nickerson does is provide administrative oversight and command to the MVFD, and he currently serves as CEO of their board, but he is not a member of that organization. So as we're assisting the MVFD with strategic planning, that may be more delineated, and the bylaws will likely have some adjustments, but we're currently looking into how that works right now. And of course, the city clerk is our own Lori Hopkins. Community Planning and Design Group, Justin Goodwin is our building official manager, so he will oversee building safety, permitting, the permits clerk, the different inspectors, so on and so forth. Planning manager is Mike Ray. Mike is currently the assistant community development director. You don't hardly see Mr. Belknap in front of the council with community development stuff anymore because he's got a lot of other responsibilities. Engineering manager at this point is Kevin Lilly. Kevin Lilly's also the city engineer. Grants manager, Elisa Anderson. And of course, Bill is also the executive director for the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency. And below that, as I said, and we'll share whenever the council wants, at any time, we have a full org chart that has every position in the city. So it's huge. You wouldn't be able to read it up here, but you're more than welcome to take a look at it. As I said, the overall structure is intended to take advantage of efficiencies, allow these managers, as you look down, each one of these little boxes has a separate manager except for the MVFD. So those managers will have more interface with the group leader or group director, and then we hopefully will have more of a executive team approach to things. I'm really looking forward to that, just because we'll be able to spend some time working on more of the planning aspects, the long-range aspects, I think, that council has asked us to do, and which we've shown with the strategic plan and the general obligation bond election and those sorts of things, that sort of planning is good for the city. So that's the idea, is to get some more efficiencies that way. There will be positions, as I mentioned in my memo, code positions, and since the council passes ordinances, and these are part of our city code, we will be requesting come forward. One of those is the Public Works Director position. As I indicated, it was created in the late 80s because those those duties are being split. More of the operational, comprehensive planning things for the utilities will be under Public Works and Services, whereas the engineering, the planning, the design stuff will be out of community planning and design. So that will be coming to you on the 7th, asking that you repeal that ordinance. Also, amazingly enough, Mr. Belknap is also the Community Development Director. That position ceases to exist as well. So we will be asking that that be repealed, as we will be asking the Human Resources Director position be repealed. Those duties will be absorbed into these new positions. I've been talking, we're working through as an executive group, is it necessary to have an ordinance outlining the duties of the deputy city supervisors? It doesn't appear like it is necessary, but we're continuing to discuss that. So, fiscal impacts, council passed the FY 2020 budget, goes into effect in about a week and a half. All of these positions, the human resources manager position, I had a management analyst, internal auditor position in my department that it is more important to get an HR position in there than continue that. We also got trained very well, I think, on some of the processes that we need to go through for management analysis. So we think that we'll be able to absorb a lot of those duties. But the funds for that position will be utilized to fund the human resource manager position. The Public Works Director, as you know, Les McDonald, before he retired, was also an engineer. So he brought a certain expertise, technical expertise to that position. In fact, it has not been so many years ago, back when we hired Kevin Lilly, that the Public Works Director was the city engineer. And at that time, when there became, with the increased supervision of the water reclamation and reuse facility, expansion in virtually all of the public utilities, and engineering, it became, at that time, it was determined that we needed more management out of the Public Works Director and less technical expertise. So we split that off. The city engineer still has to be a licensed professional engineer in the state of Idaho, and Kevin fills that role for us right now. Kevin, of course, has announced his retirement. He'll be leaving us on the 20th of December, so we'll be filling that position as well, and we have internal candidate for that.
Gary, do you think,
Yes.
could this possibly be adopted before he retires? So he would start in that position and then be replaced by someone else? Or is it likely to not actually happen until after?
Probably we will just delay that implementation of that engineering manager position. Kevin's essentially managing that division now, or that sector now, so I don't anticipate there will be a bunch of changes, but we'll determine what's the most comfortable and proceed that way. In that, there will be a need for, as Bill goes in, talks to the engineers, looks at workload. We're developing a capital improvement program. We're looking at increasingly comprehensive and transparent reporting on projects, project accumulations, accounting for projects that will be able to lay out more of a specific plan for how projects are going to be pursued over the coming years. As that happens, the position of administrative assistant to the Public Works Director, that position is now becoming an account. What's the term, Bill? Administrative assistant for capital projects. The purpose for that is so the engineers can spend more time engineering that sort of project accounting and making sure that everything goes where it belongs, being able to update. That'll all be done by an administrative assistant. There'll also be a couple of positions. Some of the Public Works Director's salary for the vacant position will be utilized to fill a couple of engineering tech positions to help support the engineers so that that technical expertise can be spent, whether it's inspection, whether it's drafting, whatever the engineering techs are doing, they can support the engineers who then support the CIP, support the utilities, and ultimately the council's strategic plan and the comprehensive plans for the utilities.
What's the CIP?
Capital Improvement Program.
Okay.
It's usually a 5 to 10-year document. We'll develop that, and we have one in utilities. It's just not as specific as we would like. Some projects have changed. We've seen some overruns in some projects, bids. In fact, the A Street project was one of those. Well number 10 and the booster stations was another example. So we're putting some processes in place that update the cost of construction on at least an annual or a biannual basis so that as we're steering toward a number, it's not a 12-year-old number. By the time we get there, we'll be still in the ballpark. So the idea, again, is to become more systematic. And what we heard from staff was that they wanted more of a say in how we develop workloads. So we're really trying to build up that ground level coming up, which is the same program that we pursued in the strategic plan. We asked all employees to participate in the development of the plan. Managers don't know everything. There's a lot of stuff out there that is very important. It's just not something that managers do every day. So with the human resources manager and the engineering techs, the administrative assistant for projects, and the engineering manager and city engineer, that is about the bulk of the changes that you will see. But as I indicated, we don't have any anticipation that we cannot do that within the budget that was appropriated. I'm really excited about even how it's working now. We have our group meetings. On Tuesday, we talk about what's going on in everybody's group. Lots of dialogue about, okay, how's so-and-so doing? They were put in that position some time ago. So you've got human resources has some feedback, or Tyler's group and Bill's group will talk about, okay, we're working on this project. Some of that you're seeing evidenced on the water building, and you'll see it in the police station. And we expect that we'll get a lot more synergies back and forth. We don't want to get in a situation where a ball is dropped because, oh, well, that was their responsibility, even though I was standing right there when it happened. That's not my responsibility. So we're trying to get rid of that.
That's why I wanted to ask you, because I know you all have been working with the fire department on their
Yes.
strategic planning. And I know that they have been working hard on recruiting, but I don't know how that's been going. So will it be determined whether or not that will end up becoming an actual
Department?
department? Yeah.
No, we have no anticipation that the volunteers it will be a paid department. My direction from my boss and the council direction I've had since the day I walked through the door was that we will support the Moscow Volunteer Fire Department for a lot of reasons. Number one, they've got a lot of heart because they're volunteers. Number two, they save a ton of money to the citizens by having a volunteer organization. And they get great personal satisfaction and pride out of it as well. So we have some paid support in administration staff, but we have no plans for a salaried operational department. Now, we'll assist them any way we can. One of the things we're doing in the strategic plan is updating the contract that we have with the volunteers. And the volunteers themselves, we're helping them as they navigate through changes in bylaws and things like that. But it will be their strategic plan, not ours.
And speaking of strategic plans, will each of the groups kind of look at strategic planning
for their group,
for their group.
yes.
So that means the whole strategic plan, when we're updating it, is really going to change shape?
The whole strategic plan will still be the responsibility of administration, but we're looking at, Jesse Flowers has indicated he's got an MBA. He's indicated an interest in that, so we're talking to him about handling the maintenance of that. So we've got a bunch of irons in the fire trying to realign duties with interests and that sort of thing.
What happens to your arm of the tree when you leave?
I'm anticipating, unless the council wishes, or the mayor wishes to change that, that you'll identify a city supervisor who will have those same duties that I have today, or as presented up here.
So I think you covered this, but this doesn't require any new positions that we might not already need at this point, say in engineering or something.
It'll require realignment of positions. So instead of having a public works director who has both administration and engineering duties, now they're administration duties. So the engineering piece of that can be, we can utilize the funding for that position to build additional technical capacity. So that's the engineering tech I was talking about. The only other one is the human resources manager, as we've talked about for the last year and a half, after Mark Brigham left us, and we decided to look at an interim solution. Is it a job that can be done half-time? We're looking at it saying, it can, but it can't be done as well as it can with a full-time manager. And human resources is very important. Your employees need to have services available to them that they can depend on. So we just think by having that staffed, that it would be better. We'll utilize the management analyst, internal auditor salary for that. I mean, it's not going to match up exactly, but it isn't like we have to go out and identify where we're going to find $70,000 for a new position. But other than that, there will be some title changes and that sort of thing, but all of the duties are covered within this whole matrix of management.
It's kind of cool to know that it actually showed up in the 80s.
Yeah,
How many on that, the way it is currently, where you had the flat line across, how many of those boxes were there?
11, I think, I counted.
there are 11 without administrative staff that I also evaluated.
Okay.
So quite a bit, and you know, there is as you know, there's a certain amount of management where the council wants to utilize the expertise of the administrator too, so you want to make sure you have time to do that. And I think over the last several years, we've shown that if somebody has a question, we shunt it off to that department where that person can get the best service. So that's the idea here.
One other question. So is there a plan for, will it be developed for initial sort of transition training for, say, those in the new supervisor roles that may be taking on something new, that
Yep.
they weren't like IS or Parks and Rec or?
Yeah, are you talking about the group leaders?
Exactly, yes.
Yes, we meet, like I said, individually and on a weekly basis, and we talk about management training. I handed out some books a couple weeks ago that, there's some opportunities for continuing education. So we'll make sure that, and all of those people are pretty experienced in managing some pretty big operations. So I don't anticipate it'll be a big issue. We step on each other's toes now and then. I've been doing this for a long time and had certain functions that I was used to doing, and they're not embarrassed at all to say, you got to kind of stay in your lane a little bit here, do what you said you were going to do. So, and that's really the trick, because overall city administration still resides here, but it can be more effectively done one level down, and the things that you don't have to go talk to the city supervisor about, It's what you do. We ask the council all the time. We're coming to you in a couple of weeks, talking about the master agreement and task order program that we've had for a couple of years. It's a pilot program. We're going to bring it back and tell you how it's been going and ask you to put it in a resolution so that we can go forward. The idea is that the things that you want to be involved in, you can be involved in. The things that are, okay, this can be handled by staff, have staff handle it, allow you to focus on the things like the strategic plan and the things you're really interested in, while retaining full authority over those functions. And I want to make sure that that is clear, that this does not change anything at all. The council still has the policy-making authority for the city and the budget authority of the city. And I think you all know Mayor Lambert well enough that I don't think he's going to cede any of his authority to an administrator either.
Well, I'm curious, in the changes, everybody keeps using the terminology of public-private partnerships. And I would think that the leadership for that would reside with the city supervisor in helping to kind of navigate or negotiate or create those things. Are you seeing that beginning to happen? Because that seems to be what's percolating, and I don't know if you're getting.
Yeah, I don't know that we've seen a huge amount of public-private partnership proposals at this time. We get them sometimes with development. There's certainly different ways of doing things. Letting contracts, for instance. I anticipate that anything that affects the entire city or it rises to the level that, in magnitude, that the city supervisor's position will be involved in that. Take, for instance, the GO bond issue. That's a big deal. As we're going forward, we're talking about incurring debt to do that, raising taxes, managing the project. Obviously, I'm not the project manager kind of guy. I will do what I've always done, try to provide administration, help to delegate things out to staff, which I believe is a manager's job as well. Determine who can best perform the functions within the city framework and then have them do it. So on any projects of a magnitude that it affects all of us or the bulk of the city, you'll still see me sitting there. I don't anticipate workload's going to go down a heck of a lot. I imagine what it'll do, at least from my perspective, is allow us to get to the point where you don't live and die by the city supervisor's position. You have folks who are ready to step in, who can handle those divisions, and that's really what we're trying to do here, is take some of that authority and diffuse it out to the level where it can do the most good and get the most efficient use of our resources.
So in budgeting now then, with the mayor, will that normally, after you've met with the department heads, but actually it'll be after you've met with the group leaders, then the mayor will be involved with that portion?
We'll do as we usually do. We will, finance and my office will go ahead and do all the preliminary work on gathering stuff together. The departments still submit their budgets. We meet with them early on to try and get them in a position that we're ready to go to the mayor. The budget, it's the council's budget, and Mayor Lambert will tell you that. He is there as the executive of the city, looking things over, providing advice. But the city supervisor will still prepare the budget through finance and through the other departments. But other than that, it should be invisible to the council.
But so in the new structure, I'll just pick any one of them, Parks and Rec be submitting their budget to that group leader?
Yes.
And then, okay.
Yeah, I imagine, but it's less chain of command as it is collaborative. We're not a big enough organization that, if somebody's preparing their budget, even now, say Bill Belknap's preparing community development's budget, he'll call me up and ask me as he's developing his budget if he wants to know, what do you think? How should I approach this? So it'll be more of a collaboration than anything else. Right now, Parks and Recreation, or Culture and Recreation budget, or Recreation and Culture, I can't remember which, has Parks and Rec, community events, and arts in it already. So we've already combined it to a certain extent. But yeah, it's a pretty collaborative thing. But yes, that division or group leader will be coordinating that coming up to the city supervisor.
I don't have any questions. I had a long
Okay,
conversation
so then,
already.
and then timing wise, I see in here, it says it will take a while before everything is implemented. So the next step is going to having this presentation to the full council and.
Coming to council, again, it's one of those things, the mayor has the authority to change the organization any way he wants, as long as he doesn't violate the code. So because we need ordinance amendments or repeals, we come to you because you're the folks who do that. But yeah, I'll be reporting on it, asking, by that time, hopefully we will have some ordinance for you to consider at that time. It's coming out in the regular agenda. The idea today was to let you know what's coming. So what I mean it'll take a little bit of time is sprinkled throughout our code there is, and Mia's done a good job working with some of the public works folks of picking out wherever the term city engineer is, or where public works director is. Public works director under our current system declares irrigation season. In another example, the fire chief declares burning season, and so on and so forth. So we need to make sure that there is clarification. And chances are what we will do is bring an ordinance to you in 2 weeks that says, okay, throughout the code, when the term public works director is used, if it is referring to this, it will go to public works and services, or it'll go to community planning and design. So it'll map everything out. So if we happen to miss something, then somebody can't say, well, you don't have a public works director anymore, so I'm not subject to that regulation. So when I say it's going to take a while, it's just going to be this structure has been in place since '77. So as we go through it, it's going to have to be, we need to be pretty thorough about how it's brought forward in the code.
And I imagine your goal is to have it all, not implement this until all of the changes are made. In other words, not piecemeal, like, okay, this section is done and now we have a manager of the public works part.
No, what we'll probably do is, except for those 3 positions, which we'll bring repealer ordinances to you next week, or 2 weeks, like I said, we'll prepare an ordinance that converts everything in the current code to the current structure as it is. But yeah, we will find pieces of the code throughout that we will have to bring to you as we identify those.
Okay, well, it just says the action is to direct staff to prepare modifications.
All right,
And it sounds like they're doing that.
yep,
Okay,
carry on.
thank you.
Okay,
Any
so-
questions, let me know.
Okay. Any other reports that you have?
I have nothing else to come before the committee.
All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you.